what we're witnessing is beyond the realms of comprehension, to be honest. When it comes to the sort of international community, so many people really do not know the details of what's going on in Palestine. And even words like you think they'd understand, occupation and colonization and, apartheid. These are abstract words, So unless you've witnessed it or felt it or been on the receiving end of it, or, then really what does it mean?
Hey, welcome to another episode of Kawalis, the afikra podcast all about film. My name is Mikey Mhenna. Today on the series, we have Farah Nabulsi, who is the director and writer behind many films, including the brand new film, The Teacher. But you may know her from her film, The Present, which is the BAFTA-winning and Oscar-nominated film that came out in 2020. Farah, welcome to the series.
Good to be here.
Okay, I guess the first question is, what is it like being on the road, making a film? I say road like it might be the sort of virtual road, but what is it like publishing a film that's all about Palestine in April of 2025, speaking to people right up to the run-up of the release? So we're recording this on April 4th, 2025. What does it feel like speaking to all these people like me about a film about Palestine when so many people are being persecuted and arrested for talking about Palestine?
For me, this film that we shot in militarily occupied and colonized Palestine, and it's set there, it's actually really a huge privilege to be able to have, first of all, a film, a cinema feature-length film that is, being released across, and specifically right now would be the United States, being released at a time when, I can have something to offer, in some kind of active solidarity with our brothers and sisters on the ground in Palestine who are essentially being annihilated. And so actually I'm feeling very grateful and very privileged at this moment in time, on this day in history, despite this last year and a half of carnage and wanton cruelty and devastation and this kind of explosion of fascism and all these people being silenced. But from my perspective, it's like, otherwise without this film, I think I personally would have, just gone insane, really. What we're witnessing is beyond the realms of comprehension, to be honest. And so I have something to offer, I hope, in that sense. And so I'm feeling really grateful, to be honest.
Yeah. I want to go back to 2013. So I think if I read this correctly, you're working in a totally different field. You're working at JP Morgan Chase as a stockbroker. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. No, I was previously an investment banker, yes, at JP Morgan. Well, but at that time I was running a business, a for-profit business. So, but yes, I was in the world of business, finance, profit. Yeah. And then I go to Palestine.
So tell me about that. I want to understand what you thought that trip to Palestine was going to be and what was it actually?
I don't know what I thought it was going to be. It was just a deep desire to go home. Because I'm somebody who's born, raised, educated in the UK. And I had been to Palestine as a child a number of times. And then around the first Intifada, my parents stopped taking us. And so for 25 years, I don't go back. And then I just kind of realized I'm a grown adult. At the time, I'm in my 30s. I have children. Why have I not gone back, considering I can?
You don't need a chaperone.
Yeah, I don't need a chaperone. I don't need anyone's permission. And I'm talking even from a practical point of view, from a passport point of view. I am one of the Palestinians who can go back in that sense of unlike the sort of millions of refugees that remain stateless to this day in squalid refugee camps. So it was one of those kind of moments that I needed to get over the stigma. So I decided that I was just going to go, and I took my eldest daughter, my eldest son, for a short initial trip and just out, just to kind of get over that. But then I go back again for a longer trip with my husband this time. And I'm seeing more and more of what's going on there with my own two eyes. So despite thinking I knew or understood the reality on the ground, really there is no, you can't compare kind of not only witnessing with your own two eyes, but almost experiencing it to an extent, like, being at a checkpoint yourself, discussing with mothers whose 14-year-old sons have been taken away in the middle of the night into Israeli military detention, driving through the West Bank and noticing all these illegal settlements on all the hilltops and realizing, wow, I can see this on a map and I can understand it, from that kind of more abstract but when you're there, you realize, wow, this is so real, so close. And it really is 21st century colonization with settlers. And it was a very, the wall, for example. I mean, you've been told, oh, a wall was built to separate, but then you're standing by the wall and it's massive. And you realize it's plowing through Palestinian lands and farmlands and towns and right through the heart of Bethlehem. And, so it all comes that much closer and more real. And, I start to go back and forth, to be honest, quite a lot in that following year and getting to know more and more and more. And I was just devastated. So when you say, how did it affect me? What did I expect? I just expected, I'm just going to go see, where my family's from, where my heritage is, and hopefully have a nice time. What happened was I spent the following 2 years falling into what I would describe as a form of depression, where I could not get my head around the extent of the injustice, how massive it was, how colossal, and that it had been going on for decades. And it had become so almost normalized and accepted by Arabs, by Palestinians, by the international community. And it really just, how systematic, how institutionalized that the Israeli occupying force had made it all. It was shocking is what I'm trying to say. It was absolutely shocking. And so for 2 years, just trying to rack my brains of what one could do to bring change. And at the same time, in order to cope with this process and these trips and these travels, I had started to write therapeutically about what I had seen and felt and began to exercise empathy, So if I fast forward to even the summer of 2014, when Israel was dropping bombs on Gaza, and at that time, the number of something like 2,500 Palestinians had been killed in Gaza. And it was a shocking number. And that included 500 children. And I remember, I wasn't a filmmaker at this point. I remember writing The Nightmare of Gaza, which became a short film eventually, as I was in Spain and my children were in a swimming pool having the time of their life. And I was just watching the news and I was on social media and I was devastated and I couldn't get my head around 500 children. And I wrote that piece. And then the madness of it being sort of 10 years later, more than 10 years later. And that, if you were to listen or watch that short film again, it could have been.
This is Oceans of Injustice?
No, this is Nightmare of Gaza. Okay. It could have been written yesterday. Literally, with what we're witnessing in real time, and this genocide in Gaza. So, written at a time when I wasn't a filmmaker, but was writing just to release something in what I was experiencing. But so those trips carried on. And then eventually, after sort of 2 years, so now we're in 2015, I just decided to jump into the deep end and adapt my first few writings, therapeutic writings, into short films. So I wrote and produced those as somebody who, you were saying, I was in banking and I was, running a business, and I realized, well, I can't do it all, and I can't do both. And I also had, at the time, younger children. And so I decided to literally change the trajectory of my life with a realization of two main things. One, I wanted to express myself creatively about, what I was understanding and seeing and experiencing. It very much spoke to my identity, not just as a Palestinian, but as a human being. And on the other hand, and including not just express myself creatively, but as a means of coping, let me create something that might, allow me to process this, but also inspire and share and convert all this depression and pain and grief. And on the other hand, it was a realization that the reason this has been allowed to go on, such injustice on such a colossal scale for so long, of course, there's many reasons, but one of the main reasons that I personally concluded was that when it comes to the sort of international community, so many people really do not know the details of what's going on in Palestine. And even words like you'd think they'd understand, occupation and colonization and, apartheid. But the fact is, and all the violence that comes with that, and all the control systems, and all the oppression, and all the humiliation, but people know these are abstract words, occupation and colonization and apartheid. So unless you've witnessed it, or felt it, or been on the receiving end of it, or then really, what does it mean? So this idea that people really don't understand, and they certainly do not feel enough with.
This is what I wanted to ask you about when it comes to those repeated trips back. I'm sure at some point people said to you, even members of your family, friends of yours who may or may not be Palestinian. I wonder if anyone said to you, Sham Tamli, what are you doing? Why do you keep on going back? What was the answer? Were you looking for truth? Were you looking for yourself? What were you looking for?
I think it was a mix of things. So first of all, I wasn't really telling anyone what I was doing. So it was just between me and my husband, who would know, okay, I'm off again. And, but he understood that, there was a part of me that was trying to understand. I felt ashamed, actually, that I had not understood the reality on the ground to the extent that I thought I had. And so it almost became a little bit addictive in terms of like, okay, let me continue with my growth in this understanding. And it is a pursuit of your identity to an extent. If I bring this to, there was an art critic that I read, that had said, you cannot make art without a sense of identity, yet it is identity we seek in making art. And before I started even making my art as a way of getting to know myself more and so forth, I was definitely sort of trying to understand who I was from a heritage point of view and from my parents and their lineage and a lot more. But put aside my Palestinian identity, there was a side to me just as a human being who realized, wow, we're living in these burdens of privilege. And if not a Palestinian for Palestinians, I don't know who, but as a human being, this is something that's clearly so unjust that I guess there was an element of wanting a sort of deeper, not just understanding, but maybe meaning, for sort of some kind of purpose. Maybe. But really, I think it was just really getting to understand more and more and more. And as I was doing that, I thought I was deciphering or getting to understand how change can come about. Because I realized like I've got to do something. I've got to get involved somehow or another. So I was looking at charities, NGOs, the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. I was really examining the entire ecosystem of things, which involved me going on the ground and meeting with different people as well, different organizers, different academics. I was just investigating really So I don't know, but I did find what I must have been looking for in some way or another. Because in the end, I came to these conclusions. And the conclusion was, people don't know enough. If somebody like myself, who at the age of 13, 14, 15, was cycling around Hyde Park for charity, for medical aid for Palestinians. So it's not like I was oblivious to what was happening.
Yeah.
You know, I am someone who's been raised to know, yes, you know, our land was stolen. Yes, it's an occupation. But the devil is in the details, you know, and it's like, okay, I clearly didn't know enough. So if I didn't know enough, then what can I expect from voters in America? Or, you know, that's one thing. And then the other thing was realizing Arabs and Palestinians around the world don't know enough. And on top of that, we're not feeling. People would use the word numb, or people wouldn't be saying to me, why are you going? Or it was more like, what can we do? This is the reality. And I'm like, whoa, how is this acceptable? This is not acceptable. So it was about reigniting those who apparently know, you know, some kind of reigniting their emotions. I mean, the description that was given to me the other day, and I won't say from who, but it translates from Arabic into the ironing of the conscience. Okay, that we have been so numbed down, and so my realization was, well, hold on, how do I reignite and ignite in the first place for those who are not ignited at all? This emotion, this empathy, this understanding and feeling of the oppressed.
It's like you're literally putting a wrinkle into their plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ruffle those feathers, get people in books, but also realizing, and this was more an academic process. And I kind of came to it by all my readings, because at this point, I'm not just traveling to Palestine. I'm reading up on stuff. I'm watching the films. I'm doing all sorts of things. And I'd come across my writings all over again as I'm going through lots of papers and documents and things. And I started crying all over again as I read my own pieces. And I thought, wow, I've even triggered my own emotions all over again just by this. And so this emotive feeling, and it was like, let me get to the bottom of this. And of course, you know, you can look at any colonizer throughout history. It's not just settler colonization, and it's not just the Israeli Zionist settler colonization. Any colonizer throughout history works very hard to dehumanize those they are colonizing. And they do this so that people of goodwill will not feel with the colonized. And so they go through this process of dehumanizing, then branding as barbarians, as terrorists, and then denying that the indigenous people ever existed even, right? And then they can carry out with all these atrocities with no recourse. And it was like, oh my God, it's so obvious that's what's taken place. Not for a year, not for 10 years, for decades. Our narrative has been hijacked. Really, it's been hijacked, it's been manipulated, it's been misrepresented, it's been, you know, it's not just misrepresented, it's like a sort of, well, anyway, so the point is...
No, I know. I mean, this is our entire organization. I'm only smiling because I'm like, this is what our Afikra's entire mission is predicated on, because we're basically, you're laying out the blueprint for what our entire mission statement is, which is the only antidote to that, to this colonization, is reactivating your curiosity and putting a wrinkle into these very neat dehumanizing narratives, and saying, no, hold on. First of all, you're not allowed to iron out my own curiosity. You're not allowed to iron out my own sense of self. And second of all, if anyone's going to be crafting the narrative of where I came from, it's going to be me. So I have to actually activate my sense of curiosity. I have to go and learn, which is what you were doing. You were literally going to investigate. What is the truth here?
Absolutely. And then when I realized the truth, it's okay, seize it back, take agency. I mean, and that's what you've done. or on your end, because it's like, okay, so what do you do with that knowledge? Then you just sit on it and go, oh God, well, that is tragic. No, it's like, right, well then, if not us, then who? How, do we allow others to kind of continue to manipulate our stories or even if they're not in the business of manipulation, but it's their lens or their perspective. It's like, okay, well, hold on. There's an African proverb that says, until the lion learns how to speak, the story will always glorify the hunter. And it's like, yeah, we're lions, and it's like, okay, come on, like we have to speak, we have to do this. Otherwise, the story will just continue and be misunderstood, deliberately misrepresented, and we just continue to be silenced and marginalized, and okay, that's that. So what do you do with that knowledge? What do you do with what you found out? And then there's the expression, of course, in Arabic, ala addi, to my capabilities, to my size, right? Mm-hmm. So, when you started afikra, it was something that you felt you could do. Like,
20 friends.
With 20 friends?
Yeah.
Amazing, beautiful, right? So you get together, you guys say, right, what can we do? You brainstorm and you come up with this concept, and then you execute and you do whatever you need to do to get it up and running. And this was the thing. I went through a whole process of like, okay, ala addi, what can Farah do? And that means assessing my skill set, my education, my contacts, my privilege, my voice, my whatever it is. I went through a process of even trying to calculate, because I was thinking to myself, wow, if my trips to Palestine have ignited in me this fire, right? I can now see why some people who are not Arab, who are not Palestinian, in fact, some of the most avid, passionate voices for Palestinian freedom are foreigners who come to Palestine, and then they see with their eyes and they're like, oh my God. And they're furious at how much the cotton was pulled over their eyes, actually, and how they had been misled. And so they become so passionate for Palestine. And I was thinking to myself, well, okay, so we see this. So what can I do? How could I bring millions of people to Palestine to experience what I've experienced, to go through this process? And of course, you look at the sort of this, and I put in quotation marks, birthright, trip that is organized by Zionist billionaires who, and groups that get funded by those billionaires to just give free trips to a Jewish person living anywhere under the sun. You could be born in Timbuktu, have very minimal lineage or any connection, or not even be that religious or anything, and get a free trip to Israel, and call it a birthright trip, right? And then you could be a Palestinian who was born in Palestine, living in a refugee camp in Jordan, and you'll never see your homeland again, right? It's crazy.
It's crazy.
But then I was thinking, well, they've been doing these trips. Let me take a look. And then I did, my investment banker side came out and did the maths. And I'm like, right. So even if it was 1 million people a year, and I was just kind of estimating things. And I was like, well, okay, it'd have to be a minimum of like 2 weeks. And then, okay, I did the maths. I mean, it was this most ridiculous, in the billions. And that would include those people being willing to actually take time off and come and whatever, completely impractical, and certainly not ala addi, not my size.
Yeah.
But when I looked at my writings and what they evoked in me, I said, I think I'm onto something. In addition to this realization that dehumanization process seems to be at the root of so much, because I believe change will come when those on the outside put enough pressure on Israel. At the end of the day, Israel is well, it's seen now completely unhinged. It's a pariah, rogue state, no accountability, carrying out with impunity, and frankly, no introspection, no self-reflection. From a psychological point of view, they're stuck in some ways, there's a lot of psychological help that's needed internally, to be honest, over there. So really, the hand has to be forced from the outside. When we talk about dealing with people on the outside, It's like, how do you engage with them on this emotional level? Speak to the heart, not the mind. All the statistics are there. All the facts are there. All the international laws, all the truths and proofs and maps and UN resolutions, it's there. So the question is, you know, how do people sort of, you know, with that all there, it speaks to the mind. It's speaking to the IQ in many ways. How do we speak to the EQ?
Yeah, I mean, statistics and numbers and figures are easy to forget, right? So we can allow ourselves to forget that stuff. Stories are sticky. They're annoyingly sticky. It's really hard to forget a story, a really good story. It's really hard to forget one.
Well, wasn't it Mary Angelou who said, you know, people might forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Exactly.
Right?
Precisely.
And that's the thing. Exactly. It's the feeling. It's the feeling
precisely
that you're left with.
So I want to talk specifically about this idea. Okay. Because I think the first short you worked on is They Took My Son. Or Today They Took My Son, excuse me.
Today They Took My Son. I was working actually on all three around the same time, but then released. So Today They Took My Son is, yes, you could call it.
I want to talk specifically about that because I haven't seen it, but I'm reading about it. And it says...
it was only 7 minutes. You should have read that.
Yeah, I assume, Mikey. What is wrong with you? But there's one part of it that I'm very curious about. Because I saw online that it's based on a UNICEF report. So this is a perfect example of translating hard, forgettable facts and figures into something that's is hard to forget. So tell me about that process. The process of, okay, I'm actually going to write this. And for those listening, you didn't direct it. So I'm curious also about that process of like being able to put on the director hat. But okay, I'm going to write this thing. I used to be a banker. That's fine. I'm going to write this.
Well, so again, so while I'm doing my travels.
What is it about? Tell us what it's about too.
Okay, so while I'm doing my travels, and I'm now reading up on things, so I'm coming across reports like this UNICEF report. Now, this report documents how thousands of Palestinian children have been processed through Israeli military detention and what that involves. And, you know, the torture that involves as well, the process, the nighttime raids, you know, imagine 3 a.m, you know, Israeli soldiers busting into your house and seizing your child. No lawyers, no phone calls. You don't get to go with them. And sometimes disappearing them for days or weeks before you even know where they've been taken or why. It's crazy. It's beyond. And we're talking military detention and war. Anyway. So I'm appalled by this. And I then, again, I haven't planned to make this a film. When I wrote Today They Took My Son, I was just a mother thinking, wow, this is devastating. And then in the same time, I've spoken with mothers in Palestine, face to face. They've described to me this process. They've described to me what they've been through. They've described to me how once their sons are located, and it can be their daughters, but more often their sons, you know, okay, is he cold? Is he being well fed? And then one mother, I remember describing to me, it was the dead of winter and she was trying to go visit him. And of course, sometimes they take the children inside 48 Palestine, which means inside Israel, which is illegal in international law. And it means that the family members in the West Bank are going to have huge problems trying to visit their children. And so she was explaining to me how she wants to bring a jumper, you know, like a sweater for her son to be able to wear in this freezing weather. And they kept rejecting it and so forth. And, you know, so the details. And so I just ended up writing this from my heart as a mother who's imagining this experience, right? Fast forward 2 years later. So, and I use the UNICEF report to sort of understand, you know, that's reality. But I write it, and then fast forward, I'm now saying, okay, I'm going to adapt my writings. So this particular short, which is 7 minutes long, and
it's on YouTube. It's my fault that I didn't watch it. It's on YouTube.
It is available. It is available online.
So we'll put in the description. There's all three are available on YouTube. So we'll put on in the description of the podcast.
Great. And so, it's from a mother's perspective. It's a mother's POV, but it's kind of like, in some ways, a reenactment of what has taken place. And it opens with the line, and it's a voiceover, short 7-minute piece. Actually, it's my voice in the end. I ended up recording it in a studio myself. And it just opens with, "Today they took my son," and that's the process. Now, of course, I'm producing, I've written this. I then get a writer, Hinshafani, who I also co-wrote The Present with later. So again, The Present was my story, and then I co-wrote the screenplay with her. But at the time, Hind, who's a writer, and I said to her, "Look, I'm making this into a film. This is the piece I've written. Can you help me to sort of adapt it for cinema or the short film?" So we worked on that, and she added a more poetic element to it for sure, and produced it. And I hired a director, and kind of, how do I say, what was powerful was that there are images of real Palestinian children being arrested, being abducted, being taken, that are juxtaposed with the short film, throughout the film, with what's taking place from a fiction narrative point of view as well. So it really hits home, kind of, okay, this is real, but the entire piece is from the mother's perspective of her son being stolen from her, and how it is done to break them as a society and to break their children. She says at one point, they accused him of throwing stones. So what? Like, did they imagine, that he would just ignore the sort of injustice that he's witnessing? And, it's like quite tone poem.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Okay. I want to fast forward a few years later to talk about The Present.
Actually, sorry, I just want to add something to this.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mickey. What was interesting is that was the first short film that I kind of went out to the world with from a, film festival point of view and perspective, not having a clue what would come of it. And actually some really top level film festivals program that 7-minute short film. And I ended up going to my first film festival and speaking to audiences in the States, in Canada. And I was really blown away by the reaction I was getting from audience members, from Q&As. People really, like, the proof of concept was confirmed to me, actually, that I was onto something. So
Yeah.
just to say, and to add to that, on the back of the conversations and Q&As, which are only half an hour, and you're sharing a platform with other filmmakers, even though all the questions seemed to come to me, I realized that people wanted to continue the conversation. So I ended up creating a website called oceansofinjustice.com that has the same name as my first film, Oceans of Injustice.
This is one of the 3 shorts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that sort of deconstructs occupation in a very easy, digestible, clear way in the English language that had never been done before, so that I could point people towards this website when the conversation had to end. I could say, well, do you know what? You want to learn a little bit more? Go to this website and you can watch my other short film, because that's my journey. But so a lot came out of Today They Took My Son, in terms of, I ended up screening it at the United Nations, in the Trustee Council Chamber. I got endorsements from filmmakers and from commentators. So just to show you a 7-minute film and how it could travel and impact was a proof of concept.
So once that concept was proven, at what point did you start writing The Present?
So The Present came, the inspiration was on one of my trips to Palestine. I was visiting a friend, and he lives in an area in Hebron where literally he steps out of his house and To the left, around 100 meters up the road, is an Israeli checkpoint. And then to the right, about 10 meters up the road from his home, where he was born, where his mother was born, where they live, is a painted white line on the ground. And because he's Palestinian, he cannot cross that line. So if you're from anywhere else in the world, or if you are an illegal Israeli settler who's living in the heart of Hebron as well, or if you're Jewish or Israeli from anywhere, you can cross that line. But my friend and his family cannot cross that line. Okay, so it's apartheid 101. And so whenever he wants to go somewhere, see anyone, have anyone visit him, buy anything, he has to go through the checkpoints, or they have to go through the checkpoint. And I was standing with him one time, having a conversation, looking at this checkpoint. And I just could not get my head around it. I was saying to him, so, if you needed a new couch in your house, and it was a checkpoint that had a metal detector, that you walk through and all of this. So it's limited space. And then there's also a turnstile. And I said, what do you do? And he's like, well, I mean, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't go. I'm like, okay, hold on. You need new instruments to, like, I don't know, hammer paintings on your wall, like a hammer, or new knives to cut your food. I don't know. That fits. And he's like, are you crazy? Like, if I were to bring any of this through, they think, obviously, they accuse me of having a weapon, and I'd probably be shot. Like, it was a whole warped conversation. And he said, look, you're supposed to ask permission. He goes, but do you think this checkpoint is here to, make my life easier or harder? I mean, it's not here for our security. It is here to push people like himself out of his home, off his land. And, it's a process of control and frustration and dehumanization and humiliation. It serves all those reasons. And that's the inspiration, right? So I'm already a filmmaker at this point. I've made these 3 short films. I've got this idea, and I started to write. So I write this story, and then I'm like, okay, this is not an adaptation. I'm in the industry, as it were, now. I would like to turn this into more traditional screenplay. And, experiencing imposter syndrome is something I think I still experience very much so, despite the sort of accolades and experience I have now. But then I've realized that some of the most seasoned artists and creatives experience imposter syndrome, regardless of what they've done and accomplished. But at the time, I didn't have that maturity to understand that. And at the time, I wasn't experienced. And I felt like, okay, I don't think I can write this screenplay alone, because I've never written script in that sense. So I get back in touch with him, and I'm like, hey, I have this story. Do you want to write this short screenplay with me? And she jumped on that. And, and to an extent, she was a hired gun, in the sense of, like, I didn't pay myself, but I did pay her to get on board with me. And The Present was born as a screenplay. And then in that process, it was, okay, who's going to direct this? And throughout my previous short films, I was asked every time on set by actors, by others, why aren't you directing? And I thought, again, imposter syndrome, and didn't I have to go to film school? I don't really know the technicals. I don't know. But I would need
I need to be given permission. I thought I was supposed to be given permission.
Yeah,
to do
some
it.
kind of permission. And also, I mean, I did interfere kind of creatively quite a lot with the directors. I think I would get on their nerves sometimes, but it is what it is. In many ways, I saw the films as my babies, regardless of not being the director. And so I could see in my mind's eye the entire world of The Present. And I thought, if I'm ever going to direct a first film, this has got to be it. And I then also reached out to a filmmaker friend, and I said to her, look, this is a screenplay. I'm thinking of directing. I've heard there's something called co-directors, because there I was thinking, okay, maybe, She wrote back to me and she said, Farah, this is a beautiful screenplay. You know exactly what you want, more than capable, and you do not need a co-director. You can do this.
Bravo عليها. That's amazing.
Really. And she was very cool. And I went, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I directed my first.
I want to play the trailer. Hold on.
ليش انت هون؟
I need toilet paper, lemons. What we have here?
Security chief, move now!
أحلى بلد في فلسطين.
ماما
What do you want? Hey! We have a system here.
My house is just there. طيب بابا. طيب ولا شيء مش مشكلة بتنحل. يلا نمشي.
What does it make you feel like watching that?
I mean, there's a side to me that's just from an artistic point of view, always conscious of like, okay, wait, is this, you know, from an artistic perspective? I don't know. I feel proud because I get reminded of like, oh, okay, this film came from my heart and I, against the odds and such difficulty, got it made. And, you know, I remember what it achieved in many ways. And it's nice to see it again. Actually, I haven't watched it in so long, let alone the film, let alone the trailer.
For somebody as self-aware as you seem to be, I feel like there's two natural imposter syndromes that would emerge, both of them so understandable. The first you've alluded to, which is, you know, I'm not a real director. I'm not classically trained. I didn't go to film school. I didn't come up through what you might think is the traditional route. The second is I grew up in the UK, and am I supposed to be telling these stories? You know, maybe I didn't grow up here. I don't know if I'm allowed to. Did you suffer from that?
I did initially.
Yeah.
And I certainly was very conscious of the fact that once my film started to be in front of sort of Palestinian audiences that are on the ground living, like this is their lived Palestinian experience, you know, what would they think? How would they react? And the last thing you ever want to do is not do justice to this injustice that is being experienced firsthand in the present day by so many, by millions. And, you know, so I was on edge at the beginning in that sense. When I started to get feedback on my films, and we can speak even specifically to the present at this point, it was overwhelmingly positive from people literally saying, Palestinian on the ground saying, thank you, this is my life, or thank you, this is me every day, or you know, of course I got the occasional Palestinian pointing out that, you know, this is the PG version and this is the soft version. And look, this comes from certain people who are, you know, very, very angry, and rightly so. I understand that their lived experience is just so, you know, beyond comprehension. And it's so difficult that they misunderstand cinema. And so for them, they're kind of mixing up documentary or, you know, from where I'm coming from. And so I'm compassionate and empathetic to that feedback, and I understand it to an extent, but it's far and few. And I don't let that detract or distract from what I believe my work is doing. And I'm kind to myself because I know my intentions are good. And I know that my source material and my understanding is not pie in the sky. It is me who I've been at checkpoints. I've been put aside at checkpoints. I've experienced some of these things, nowhere near what Palestinians on the ground experience day in and day out. But I've witnessed these things. So I think I'm emotionally intelligent enough and intellectually intelligent enough to kind of understand it in the different layers, having witnessed with my own two eyes, as well. And the discussions, really getting to the root of the feelings, the thought, the experiences. So I feel like I've done the right kind of research psychologically, you know, emotionally, physically. I've gone through checkpoints where I did not need to go through. where I would go through, for example, I've been at a checkpoint at 3 a.m, a number of checkpoints on my own, that are industrial checkpoints where, I would go through, just to experience with all the laborers, the Palestinian laborers, what they're going through. Of course, it's 1 morning for me, 2 mornings for me, 3 mornings. It's not a lifetime, but to really understand. So I feel like I have gone through what a filmmaker could put herself through to get to a place where at least I'm able to understand that much better. Now, overall, my work has had a really good reaction from Palestinians on the ground.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you're right. I was a bit conscious of it. And now I'm like, you know what? This is what I can do and how I can do it. It seems to have met the sort of approval, again, in quotation marks, of Palestinians on the ground. What I will say is also Palestinians, there's an empowerment when the oppressed can see themselves on the screen, on the big screen in many ways, reflected. They feel seen, they feel heard, witnessed, and it's empowering. So actually, even more so, not just from the messages I get and all of that, but when I'm with audiences, whether it's been audiences that are Arab audiences, Palestinian audiences, or reactions from Palestinian film festivals or whatever it is, it's more like what the feeling I get without being given a direct, oh, thank you and all this. You feel it, you sense it in the Q&As, in the questions, and that's beautiful, to be honest.
Okay, speaking of reception, the president came out, or you were in the midst of receiving these accolades and this acclaim right after October 7th.
This is the teacher.
The president.
No, the president? No. October 7th is, before.
Oh, yeah, sorry. This is October 7th. The president came out in 2020, صح?
Yeah. It was released in 2020, and then it had the whole Oscar nomination in 2021. And so it was during COVID.
During COVID, sorry. My Lebanese brain, COVID, Saura, October 7th. This is all one dark period. Okay, so then let's talk about Saleh Bakri, and then let's get to the teacher. So you start working with Saleh Bakri on The Present. How did that relationship form, and how did it evolve over that process?
So it was funny, but so when I was discussing with Hind Shafani, my co-writer with The Present, I said to her, she said to me, who do you imagine as Yusuf and the father in The Present? And I said to her, there's an actor that I think is just incredible. And if he was my Yusuf, it'd be great. Saleh Bakri. And she said, oh, yeah, I know him. I mean, not very well, but I have his email address. I've met him once. And do you want me to, I don't know, make an intro or an email? And I said, yeah, please. Yeah,
the answer is yes.
She did. So she did. And then I sent him the screenplay, and he really liked it. And so it just begun like that. It was the conversation begun. I was doing, trips again, still to Palestine. We then met up, got to know each other a little bit better. And that's it. It was like he got on board. It was not easy for me. He's a far more seasoned, at the time again. So I'm writing, producing, and directing my first film. And, he's been on multiple sets. He's a very seasoned actor. So it's a little bit, intimidating, to be honest. And, just had to kind of, I'm learning on the job, quite literally. And so, we managed to make this beautiful, powerful film. He really is so exceptionally talented. And what was more interesting is then kind of getting him on board for the teacher, because at that point we've made this incredible short film together that has received such incredible reactions. It was almost a no-brainer that we should work together again on a feature film, and then that's where our sort of working relationship evolved that much more. And he kind of has become more of a collaborator with me on other ways. Like, I know we're going to talk about the teacher in a second, but, we did Arabic translation. So of the teacher screenplay together, because I write in English, but I know what I want to say in Arabic, but I don't read and write very well. And, even artistic opinions, production, headaches, I would turn to him. He's become a friend, and you get to know how that artist and professional works that much more when you work with them more and more. And, the set environment, and, he even pressured me. I say pressured me, but I'm grateful that he did. There's one scene in The Teacher, not in the present, where, he sort of said, Farah, I'm not convinced that this is what you want to say in this scene. And it was only a few days before we were shooting. And I was like, oh God, don't make me I don't want to rewrite the scene. But the truth is he was niggling at something, or he was picking at something that had been niggling at my mind for a long time. But, sometimes when you're so exhausted and you've been doing so many different things, you try to avoid, having to really dig deep and change something. And, he said, take a look at it again and push me to do that. And I did. And I rewrote it. And the scene was so much better. And I'm so glad I rewrote it literally 2 days before shooting it. So he's got a lot of value to yeah.
Amazing. Let's watch the trailer for The Teacher, which comes out. When does it come out?
It will be out across the US. We start in New York, April 11th, and then April 18th nationwide. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, here's a trailer. This is off YouTube.
I can't get my head around how shocking yesterday was.
Most of the houses have demolition orders. It was just their turn.
هلا شرفت Miss United Nations. Hello, Miss Lisa. Welcome to our home.
You're not confined in that prison anymore.
المخ العضلات.
You have to finish school. Yakub, please, man.
يا ولاد الداش.
قاعدين يحرقوا كرم الزيتون. يعقوب
احنا كثير ما اتقتل ولا ما كنا جبنا له.
إنه لثاني الكاهنين الذي يبلغ من العمر 24 سنة كان قد اختطف منذ 3 سنين.
There are things I'll never be able to share with you. خلي عندك شوية أمل وتمسك فيه.
آدم والله ولا قتل أخوي ولا قلت لا قتلت أخوي ولا
الانتقام إحساس بشع بوكلك وبدمرك من جوا وما بحل ولا شيء ومش مهم شو السبب.
هذا جندي المخطوف صح؟
ممنوع تجيب السيرة لولا حدا فاهم؟
فاهم أنا معك.
We will use every source we have to find him. Please, do you know where my son is?
They'll keep him alive as long as it takes.
How do you know that?
Because they know that your people believe your son is worth thousands of mine.
I can't think of a more important topic to discuss than the one that this film discusses. And one that specifically American and European audiences need to actually explore emotionally and intellectually. Can we back up and talk about what those true events were that inspired the writing of this film?
Yes. So during my travels, but even before my travels, I remember this particular story in the British media about an Israeli occupation soldier called Gilad Shalit, who had been captured in 2006. And in 2011, he was released for over 1,000 Palestinian political prisoners. hundreds of whom were women and children, and hundreds of whom were being held in administrative detention, which means without no charge or trial. And I just thought to myself, this was a really crazy imbalance in value for human life. And the fact that Palestinians know that they are valued in such a way that they could sort of almost demand, in return for this soldier, we want 1,000 of our own. And that's how the Israelis would value them. I mean, of course, I never could imagine that imbalance could have culminated today in or been magnified in such a way that there seems to be no value for Palestinian life as we witness this genocide in Gaza. But at the time, that imbalance really shocked me. And I thought it was fascinating. And it's maybe at the root of the problem, actually, this severe dehumanization that would allow for that kind of perspective or lens on a people, 1 to 1,000. But I also remember thinking at the time that to that soldier's parents, loved one, what is he worth? He's worth the world, I guess. If you ask me what any of my children are worth to me, of course, it's a rhetorical question, but I would rhetorically reply, the world, the universe. Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of thing that I wanted to explore. But of course, you can see from the trailer, there's so much more I wanted to explore as well, whether it be other elements and other true stories that is experienced by thousands of Palestinians, children being processed through military detention, home demolition, the illegal Israeli settler violence and vandalism that is going unchecked prior to October 7th was at an all-time high anyway. And since then has increased exponentially. It's shocking. So I wanted to kind of explore many elements. And that's kind of, where this film was born.
Because watching it now, you would think, especially with so much coverage and discussion about, quote unquote, the hostages post October 7th, somebody would watch this and be like, oh, wow, Farah cooked this up very quickly after October 7th,
I have had a few people ask
I'm sure.
festivals and like, oh my God, did you make this since October? I was like, no, first of all, making a film like this is a Herculean task. It takes a number of years. So no. I wrote it, I thought it up, I guess, 5 years ago, wrote it about 4.5 years ago, 4 years ago. And then we shot it, I guess, 2.5 years ago. So no.
And what was the date that it was, released?
Yeah, so it was released at Toronto International Film Festival, September 2023. And then, and had an incredible reaction, amazing reaction out of Toronto. And 1 month later, October 7th happened. And of course, what followed was a 1.5 years of genocide. And here we are. So I never could have imagined that this film would arrive at this very, very crucial juncture of the discourse where this, like you mentioned, this exchange of hostages. And, it's really fascinating, these words that are used. Yes, prisoners or hostages or, prisoners of war. And I call them, political prisoners. But they are hostages at the end of the day. And this concept of hostage taking by Israel has been going on for decades, But it just happens to have arrived, and it just happens to be part of the storyline that I had written before all of this.
Yeah. You very generously sent over a screener for me to watch. And as I was watching, I couldn't help but think of those images of the Israeli hostages being released, kissing, the Palestinians wearing, wearing face masks, basically, before they left. And the teta, the old grandmother coming back to like kiss the guy on the head. I couldn't help but get those images out of my head, about the like humanizing every single person in this scene, in those videos. Like who are these actual humans? What are their stories? what are their fears and their challenges, and like what is their humanity? And I think this film does a beautiful job of trying to explore the humanity of these people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if I want to point out what this film is about,
yeah,
it's, for me, of course, and it's an interpretation of whoever watches it and how they think and feel about it. But for me, it was always about, and in no particular order necessarily, but parental love. The love of a father. In this case, of course, Bassem, but there's also Simon. And how, there is a universality of this idea of, loving your children and the grief and loss, experienced. It's about the pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
And it's about the inevitability of resistance when no other path to freedom or justice remains or exists. And so, of course, the socio-political is there, it's integral to the story, but I'm very interested and intrigued, and what I want to explore is the human dynamics, the specific. And it really means getting into these characters, their lived experience, and taking a look at the choices and decisions these characters make in this very harsh, difficult reality, right? Rather than branding anyone. I want to examine the conditions and the experiences, circumstances that drive people to make certain choices and certain decisions, right? Rather than, branding them. So for me, you might have noticed in the film, I mean, I don't even pay attention to any political faction or even any religion, I'm focused on the human. And what, I want to leave you contemplating those choices and decisions in that reality. What would you do? How would you react if your son was taken, if you wanted to get your son lost, if he was killed, if your home was demolished, what the choices and decisions? That's what I'm interested in.
If your brother is shot.
If your brother is shot, if your olive groves are set on fire, we're talking about your livelihood, whatever it is, what would you do? And how would you react? And so it comes down to, who are we to judge? Unless this is our lived experience, not for a week, not for a month, not even for a year. This is our lifetime lived experience. Who are we to judge anything, actually? Yeah. And so, but, let's look at these characters. Let's look at these people. Let me bring people closer to you. I want you to hear Bassem breathe, and then you can observe and you can feel. And how do you feel at the end of the film? Did Bassem, he's definitely got like 5 life sentences. Are we happy with that? Are we okay with that? I mean, he did kill someone. I'm not like spoilers here, but stuff happens in the film and you think, well, hold on. How do we feel about certain elements of this? Who are we rooting for and why? And if that were me, what would I have done? And that's my interest.
It's like a raisin in the sun. It's like, okay, let's explore this. Can I ask about the British character?
Sure.
What is the use of this character in this film? Why did you choose to include this person? It's a very intentional choice, clearly.
Yeah. Intentional, not intentional. I mean, I go where my creativity takes me. So it's like, but I'm always going to be influenced by my experiences and consciously, subconsciously, of what I know of Palestine, what I've experienced, who I've met, and so forth. So for me, I've always found that definitely internationals present on the ground in Palestine, they're there, and they are present, whether it's tourists or the UN, volunteer workers, NGOs, international observers, activists, whatever it is, they're there, and they're sort of hardly. It's like it's very binary in people's minds outside. But the problem is that I think people on the outside just perceive it as, Palestinians and Israelis. That's it. Like there's no realization that the international presence is on the ground. Now, for me, I think a lot of people come with a sort of naivety and then eventually really sort of understand the reality on the ground. And that is definitely something I was happy to explore in the sense of the arc of the character of Lisa. I've met Lisas. I'm familiar with people like Lisa. She didn't have to be British, but that was just more a practical thing of let's keep the language in English and in that sense. But what I was most interested in was Basim's character in all its dynamic elements, as it were. And so you have this person, this man who, despite his resistance, despite his loss and his grief, is still has a desire for love and connection. And I think that in some ways that kind of counters certain stereotypes or perceptions of what a person like Basim should be, or somehow he's not multidimensional. And it's like, okay, if he's this, he can't possibly be that. And it's like, well, no, he can. And so it was really examining him in all his aspects, as to why the sort of relationship element is in the story. I found that something interesting, and added an element of what could have been as well. For him,
the reception. I mean, there's such a intense attack on any pro-Palestinian voices in the U.S. right now. I mean, globally, obviously, but in Europe and the U.S. and Canada, there's this really, really active, aggressive, sometimes violent campaign against anyone with a platform, big or small, 1,000 followers on Instagram, who's interested in speaking up for Palestine after October 7th, specifically October 7th. Have you felt that in a pronounced way since this film came out?
Well, I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I have not felt it directly myself, in the sense of, like, of course I get the occasional sort of, hate message and thing on Instagram or something, and not even worth giving oxygen to in this conversation.
But from film festivals and from the industry itself?
Well, so my experience is where the film has, so there's nothing direct, because you think about it, where the film has been programmed, let's say at film festivals, well, it's been programmed because they like the film, and then the festival seems to have received it well. So, for example, at the San Francisco International Film Festival, we won the audience award. So it wasn't just the festival that liked the film and programmed the film, the audience voted for the film and liked it. Same in Washington, D.C., Film Fest, same thing. So where it's programmed, it's obviously being received with some kind of admiration and love. And then the reaction of audiences has only complemented that to confirm, or the Best Actor awards, or the, we've received over 18 international awards from film festivals that we've screened at. I can't speak to why certain festivals didn't program us. It could very well be that they just didn't want the film. It could be that they had a great lineup and this just didn't fit in. I can't point everything and say, oh, it's because it's Palestinian, it's Palestinian. No. But I'm sure some, were self-censoring. Maybe they were, pro-Zionist, sympathetic. I don't know. Again, I will never know. No one's directly telling me, Same with distributors. We've had some distribution, and then in other places, we haven't. Now, is it self-censoring? Because they're in some kind of fear. We have had a couple tell our sales agents, look, we really like the film, but we don't want to deal with the headache that we believe this film will garner and bring towards us. And others have said, oh, thank you, yes, we're going to pass. And maybe they're genuinely just passing, or without saying anything, they're not interested in showcasing this film for personal reasons or sympathetic reasons, whatever. Again, I will never know. I do think that a film that has had such a wonderful reaction from audiences that have seen it, So it ticks the box, and, audience awards, best actor awards, the critic award, we were longlisted for a BAFTA. We've had various cinema releases where the film has been received beautifully. And you'd think that would tick the boxes of what a distributor would be looking for. And the main thing they always say is, how relevant is this film to the time? How pertinent to the time? I mean, I can't think of a film more pertinent to the time than The Teacher right now. And you think, well, hold on, even if you were just a distributor who really couldn't give a damn about Palestine, but it's a good quality film with some brilliant actors that audiences are liking, that is extremely pertinent to the time, could make you some money, surely you should want to distribute it. So, but I can't speak to any of this. I don't know for a fact who and what, whatever. What I can tell you is that definitely there is elements of that the film, certain people would not want this film to be seen, on a mass scale. And we are independent cinema. So, it's difficult already. Some wonderful independent films never see the light of day, and they've got nothing to do with Palestine.
Yeah.
But in our case, we are pushing because it is so important to the time. I want this film to be out in the world, not because I made it and not because I wrote it, and because of what this story is about. I say I want to take you on this emotional journey. This is what I want from all my films, into the lives and experiences of these characters, right? But now I feel that this film can offer a context, a deeply human context that is so important, but often missing from the discourse on Palestine, especially at this moment in time. So I feel like it'll do more, or it's a film it's not an ordinary film at an ordinary time. It's a film that has so much more to offer at such a crucial, urgent time. And, that's the part that kind of breaks my heart, if there has been censorship and all of that. But direct attacks and things, no, nothing worth mentioning.
Farah, this was amazing. I'm so honored that you came on the series. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And it comes out, The Teacher comes out in the US on April 11th. We're recording this April 4th. I hope we're going to get it out in time. But
well, I'd say the bigger release is April 18th. That's the nationwide release. So hopefully you will. And if people show up, then it should stay in the cinemas longer and longer. So I would say just please make sure, you mention well, I'll mention it now, shall I? www.theteacher.film. And you'll be able to go from there and see all the different locations across the US, some in Canada as well, all the different theaters. And the more you kind of get people to go and see this film, the more likely cinemas will, know this is the kind of film you want them to program. And I'm deeply grateful, actually, for those programmers, who, and our distributor, of course, in the US, Watermelon Pictures, but for programming the film. So when they know that there's an audience, then they'll keep the film longer, and then more and more people have to see it. So I really hope that it does get seen.
And if you go to that website, you also see that in the Middle East and North Africa, you can watch it on Google TV and Apple TV and OSN TV, which is fantastic. So hopefully afikra communities around the region will be able to watch it. Farah, again, thanks so much. People can find you on social media. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.